Welcome to the Mohave County Housing Authority Tenant Briefing. As a general rule, when inside an MCHA building, restrooms can be located in the lobby, while food in open containers are prohibited in order to maintain a clean, presentable environment. With housekeeping out of the way, we can now go over specific procedures that follow. This presentation is designed to introduce you to the Section 8 program and teach you the rules and regulations for the Section 8 Rental Housing Assistance Program and Supportive Housing Program. Please follow along in your briefing manual, starting after the overview of the housing process. We will not read it word for word, just touch on the highlights. Any questions you have can be written down and taken to MCHA staff at the end of the presentation. We will be covering the following in the briefing: the housing process, what the family must and must not do, criminal activity, owner responsibilities, housing owned by relatives, where a family can lease, eligible housing types, portability, payment standards, rent reasonable, security deposits, and utility allowance. The housing process will consist of issuing and using vouchers, finding a housing unit, and completing the approval process. A voucher is a documentation agreeing that the family has met program requirements. The voucher will last 60 days and can be extended twice at 30-day increments through a written request to be approved by MCHA. Please note that if the family fails to locate a housing unit within the expiration date provided and does not request an extension, the voucher will be voided and the family's application will be removed from the housing program waiting list. Remember, your voucher is an agreement between you and MCHA. You are agreeing to abide by the Statement of Family Obligations in return for rental assistance. Your voucher is valid anywhere within Mohave County that has rental units. You must find a rental unit and submit the request for tenancy approval before your voucher expires. When finding a housing unit, you can choose the unit you are currently living in and lease in place, or search public listings including the MCHA rental listing book. Make sure the unit you select is in good condition and is affordable, as you will be signing a 12-month lease. Consider the yard maintenance that you are responsible for, your budget, and ability to care for the property. Also, the neighborhood safety, schools, and public transportation. Consider the utilities provided by the landlord and security deposits required. Remember, Section 8 does not pay for deposits. A completed request for tenancy approval must be turned in to your housing specialist. It is evaluated for payment standard compliance and rent reasonable. You will be notified to arrange for the utilities to be turned on unless the landlord is responsible to pay for them. An inspection will be scheduled with the landlord within 15 business days. If the inspection fails, the repairs must be made by the landlord before the unit is approved by MCHA. Do not sign the lease until the unit is approved by MCHA. Even if the landlord says it's okay, do not sign the lease until the unit has passed inspection. We have finished the overview of the housing process. At this time, please follow along within your briefing manual, starting on page 2, as we will now be going over eligibility. To be eligible for participation, an applicant must meet HUD's criteria, as well as any permissible additional criteria established by MCHA or required by specific programs. Until the family has found a unit, it passed inspection, and they signed the lease, and eligibility requirements remain in full force and effect. Annual income must not exceed the annual limit established by HUD for the area and family size based on program requirements.
The family responsibilities are specified in the voucher, the tenancy addendum in the housing assistance payment contract, and the lease executed between the family and the owner. The following lists the responsibilities expected of the family. Search for your own housing. MCHA does not own the units that you will lease. You choose where to live. Report all changes in family composition and income in writing within 10 days of their occurrence. Your housing assistance can be terminated if you do not. Supply any information that is determined necessary to MCHA within the specified time frame. Disclose and verify Social Security numbers and sign and submit consent forms. Supply true and complete information to MCHA such as, I got a job at Sam's Club and I make $7.80 an hour and I work 22 hours per week. Be responsible for HQS breach by the family, such as not paying your utilities that you have to pay and notifying your landlord of problems with the unit in writing. Otherwise, you could be held responsible for damages that weren't notified to the landlord. Allow the housing authority to inspect the unit at reasonable times and after reasonable notice, with the exception of the initial inspection. You will in general receive approximately 30 days notice of an annual inspection that cannot be rescheduled for any reason. Notify MCHA and the owner in writing before the family moves out of the unit or terminates lease to owner. Promptly give the housing authority a copy of any owner eviction notice or bank foreclosure notice. Use the assisted unit for residence by the family. The unit must be family's only resident. The composition of the family residing in the unit must be approved by the housing authority. Promptly inform the housing authority in writing of the birth, adoption, or court-awarded custody of a child within 10 days of its occurrence. Request prior housing authority approval prior to adding any other family member as an occupant to the unit. Get housing authority approval before having a foster child or live-in aide reside in the unit. The family may use the unit for self-employment like a child care business. Supply any information requested by the housing authority or HUD. Promptly notify the housing authority in writing if a member of the family will be absent for more than 2 weeks. The family may be absent up to 30 days. Any longer, and the family must have written permission from the housing authority. In addition, it is very important to attend your scheduled appointments. Annually, you will be scheduled for an annual re-exam of family income, assets, and approved expenses. You will have to come to our office for this appointment. If interim changes in income or composition will change our HAP payment and your tenant portion of the rent, you may be required to come to our office for an appointment. Reasonable accommodations are also reviewed for persons with disabilities or elderly. These appointments can be rescheduled with reasonable notice. You have seen what the family must do. Now we will cover what the family must not do. Commit any serious or repeated violation of the lease. The lease is between you and your landlord, and the housing authority is not a party to it. Sublease or rent the unit, assign the lease, or transfer the unit. Commit fraud, bribery, or any other corrupt or criminal act in connection with the program. Use a controlled substance on or off the premises. Please note that marijuana is a controlled substance at the federal level, and its use is a violation of the housing assistance even if you have a medical card. Use alcohol in a way that may interfere with the health, safety, or right to peaceful enjoyment of the premises. Engaging in drug-related, violent, or any other criminal activity which may interfere with the right to peaceful enjoyment of the premises. Receive Section 8 assistance and another subsidy from any other program for the same unit. Receive assistance while residing in a unit owned by immediate family members unless it is to accommodate a person with disabilities.
Prior to program participation, all criminal activity must be disclosed to the PHA no matter what. This goes for all arrests, criminal charges, or convictions, whether or not it is a misdemeanor or a felony. However, minor traffic violations do not have to be disclosed, with the exception of a DUI, as they usually result in arrest. During your participation in the voucher program, no member of the family may commit any criminal activity. You must notify the housing authority within 72 hours of any arrest or conviction of any family member. Now we can briefly touch up on some owner responsibilities. Owners must screen the family for behavior and check references, comply with the HAP contract and the Arizona landlord-tenant laws, normal landlord functions such as collect the family portion of the rent from the family enforce the lease, and pay utilities they are responsible to pay. They must maintain compliance with the assisted lease as well. They can allow modifications to the unit for reasonable accommodations for a person with disabilities. However, they don't have to pay for them. Housing owned by immediate family members is prohibited by HUD. The only exception would be as an accommodation for a person with disabilities. The family may lease anywhere in Mohave County. You may select an apartment, house, duplex, townhome, condo, or a mobile home as long as it has tie-downs. Next, we have the subsidy standards. This is how we determine the size of the voucher issued to you. It must provide for the smallest number of bedrooms needed to house the family without overcrowding. The number of bedrooms assigned to your voucher is based on Mohave County Housing Authority's Subsidy Standards policy. MCHA will assign a bedroom to the head of household or spouse/co-head and one bedroom for each two persons within the household, regardless of gender or age. The payment standards are the maximum amount MCHA can expend on the unit and are based on the voucher size issued to you. The payment standard is the lesser of the payment standard for the voucher size or the actual size of the unit. An example would be if you have a one-bedroom voucher and you select a zero-bedroom unit, then it is the zero-bedroom payment standard that will apply. Rent must be comparable to other unassisted units that the landlord owns or is in the area of the assisted unit. MCHA does not include security deposits or utility deposits in the subsidy. You need to pay them on your own. For the utility allowance, find the unit type, unit number of bedrooms, the type of services, such as gas, electric, or bottle gas. The Housing Authority will provide a utility allowance to the family if the family is responsible for the cost of utilities, except for telephone. Reminder, you will only receive the refrigerator or range allowance if you have to provide them in the unit yourself, and you will only receive the credit for 12 months. If you choose to use your own refrigerator instead of the one the landlord provides, you do not get the credit. You must disclose all income received by the family member in writing to Mohave County Housing Authority. Failure to do so could result in the termination of assistance, overpayment to MCHA, and criminal prosecution for fraud. Let Mohave County Housing Authority staff determine if the income is included as annual income, as not all income is included and may not affect your tenant portion of the rent. Income from assets is included, so you must report all assets that the family members own, including children's savings accounts. We will now go over the Mohave County Housing Authority's rent calculation. The following example is based on an elderly or disabled family with one dependent child in their household. Our first calculation is determining the total gross income of the family. In this scenario, the elderly or disabled head of household receives $730 per month from Social Security, and there is no other income. Her granddaughter lives with her and is under the age of 18 and does not receive any income from other sources. As you can see, she gets $730 and it is multiplied by 12 because she is paid monthly for a total annual income of $8,760. Now we must determine if she is entitled to any income deductions. Based on the above scenario, she will receive an allowance as an elderly person in the amount of $400, and she has a dependent in the household for an additional allowance of $480 per child dependent, or in this case, one child, for a total deduction of $880 from her gross annual income, making her adjusted gross annual income $7,880. Now we must calculate what her adjusted monthly income would be by taking the $7,880 and dividing it by 12, which equals $657. This is the adjusted monthly income and the figure we will use to calculate the TTP, total tenant payment. Tenants are required by HUD to pay up to 30% of their adjusted monthly income towards their housing costs. Based on our above scenario, we would take the $657 adjusted monthly income and times it by 30%, which is $197. This would be the total tenant payment as long as the tenant did not exceed the payment standard, gross contract rent plus utility allowance. Now that we determined the total tenant amount you are responsible for, we will now determine what your actual tenant rent is. We do this by applying the utility allowance for your unit. You have a 2-bedroom unit and you are responsible for your electric payment, and the owner property manager is paying water, sewer, and trash. Based on this scenario, the utility allowance that applies is a total of $72. We do not pay this utility allowance to you. We deduct this $72 from your total tenant payment, making your net tenant rent payable to the landlord of $125. This calculation has been an estimate only. We recommend that you be sure to read about the gap payment in your briefing manual, as we will now be covering the remainder of this presentation. When a family finds a suitable unit and the owner is willing to lease the unit under the program, a completed request for tenancy approval packet and a copy of the proposed lease is how the family will request that the Housing Authority approve the unit. Please fill out the tenant information page on page 2 because we will need a phone number to contact you for the inspection. The landlord for the unit must complete the request for tenancy approval packet. Both of you sign on page 2. This is a good time to review the lease with the landlord. A copy of the lease must be turned in with the request for tenancy approval packet, and it needs to be returned to the Mohave County Housing Authority. Once the unit is initially eligible, you will be contacted to turn on utility service. Once the utilities are on, an inspection can be scheduled. The property must be inspected initially and annually. There is a list of what we look for in your briefing packet and a booklet called A Good Place to Live. The home must pass an initial inspection and the utilities must be on for this inspection. Once you and the landlord execute the lease, MCHA will execute our housing assistance payments contract with the landlord.
After the initial term of the lease, the family may move to another assisted unit if the family has issued 30 days notice to the landlord and MCHA has received a copy of its 30 days notice in advance. The unit is left in good condition with no tenant-caused damages or money owed to the landlord. The landlord chooses not to renew the lease. The family may only move once in a 12-month period. Portability allows you to move to another jurisdiction with assistance, statewide and nationwide. You must lease in Mohave County for 12 months before requesting portability. Once again, a family can only move once in a 12-month period. You can talk to your housing specialist about specific requirements. Portability contacts can be found in your briefing manual. If the housing assistance is terminated for any reason, you will receive a certified letter from MCHA. You have 10 days from the date of the letter to request a hearing if you do not agree with the decision. Refer to your manual if you receive a termination notice from us, as we will now go over the causes of termination of assistance. For grounds of termination, the Housing Authority may, at any time, terminate assistance due to a family's action or failure to act, including family violates any family obligation. Any member of the family has been evicted from federally assisted housing in the last 5 years. If any family member's assistance has ever been terminated under the Voucher program. If any family member commits fraud, bribery, or other corrupt or criminal act regarding any federal housing program. If the family currently owes rent or other amounts to the Housing Authority or to another housing authority in connection with Section 8 or public housing programs. If the family has not reimbursed any housing authority for amounts paid to an owner under a HAP contract for rent, damage to unit, or other amounts owed by the family under the lease. If the family breaches an agreement to pay amounts owed to the housing authority or amounts paid to an owner by a housing authority. If the family is an FSS participant and fails to comply without good cause with the FSS contract of participation. If the family has engaged in threatening, abusive, or violent behavior towards the housing authority personnel. If the family has been engaged in criminal activity or alcohol abuse. However, the Housing Authority must terminate assistance for any of the following reasons. if the family has been evicted from housing assistance under the Section 8 program for serious violations of the lease. If any member of the family fails to sign and submit consent forms for obtaining information in accordance with program regulation. If a family member does not establish citizenship or eligible immigration status. If the housing authority determines that any member of the household has ever been convicted of drug-related criminal activity for the manufacture or production of methamphetamine on the premises of federally assisted housing. If any household member is subject to a lifetime registration requirement under a state sex offender registration program. If the housing authority has not paid any subsidy on behalf of the family for 6 months because the family's TTP covers the gross rent. If the family is absent from the unit for a period of more than 180 consecutive calendar days for any reason. Fraud and abuse are also grounds for termination. Here are some examples below. Receiving housing assistance from another agency while receiving Section 8 housing assistance. Making side arrangements with the landlord for utilities or side payments. Failing to report changes within 10 days of their occurrence. Asking housing personnel to overlook a change or a side arrangement. MCHA is now turning over cases of fraud to the county attorney for prosecution. Like the family, an owner has restrictions of their own. For example, HUD warns landlords not to request side payments or excess rent beyond what is in the HAP contract. It states, improperly requiring tenants to pay rent in excess of what is authorized by the HAP contract represents both an actionable offense under the False Claims Act and deplorable behavior directed towards the very person whom the HCV program was designed to serve. These actions constitute false claim against the federal government and therefore qualify for triple damages plus penalties under the False Claim Act. If your landlord at any time requests side payments in excess of what the housing authority has authorized you to pay, do not pay it and contact your housing specialist immediately. New laws enacted by the United States Congress now protect tenants in units that are being foreclosed on. If you receive a foreclosure notice on the front door, bring it to MCHA as soon as possible. We will issue you a new voucher if you decide to move right away. Otherwise, you may wait to see if the new owner wants to participate in the Section 8 program. As a recap, your voucher is good for 60 days. If you do not find a place in 60 days, you need to request an extension. There is a log provided at the back of the briefing manual for you to keep track of your search efforts. Please fill it out if you are having a hard time finding a place and turn it in before your voucher expires. In general, the unincorporated areas of the county outside of Colorado City have a higher percentage of persons in poverty. Page 27 gives you the percentage of persons in poverty and minority concentration for certain geographic areas of the county. Areas within the city limits are closer to public transit, economic opportunities, shopping, and doctors. A person with a disability may require special accommodation in order to have equal access to the Section 8 HCV program. The types of reasonable accommodations the PHA can provide include changes, exceptions, or adjustments to a rule, policy, practice, or service. Federal regulations stipulate that requests for accommodations will be considered reasonable if they do not create an undue financial administrative burden for the PHA or result in a fundamental alteration in the nature of the program or services offered. A fundamental alteration is a modification that alters the essential nature of a provider's operation. For further information regarding requesting a reasonable accommodation, see attached MCHA Reasonable Accommodation Policy. MCHA has a Family Self-Sufficiency Program available to current Section 8 participants. The Family Self-Sufficiency Program and Home Ownership Voucher programs are a pathway to home ownership with program assistance and/or offer the ability to earn money in your escrow account. If you are interested in participating in this program, contact the Self-Sufficiency Coordinator or your housing specialist. This is the end of the MCHA briefing presentation. Your housing specialist will now return and answer any questions you may have.